Now, I was talking to some Italians we had dinner with last night, and they were talking about the power of television here, and that that wouldn't happen. Something like that doesn't happen. The idea that there's other ways to get information out, and your leadership obviously has a lot of interest in television. How does that change in a place like Italy or anywhere else? Because in the United States, YouTube has a massive influence on a lot of things. I think we'd all agree Sarah Palin, I won't go into it, we're sorry, was very much damaged, I think, by the amount of mockery that Tina Fey, who was a comic, did of her on a program called Saturday Night Live. And what happened is it went viral on the internet, and tens of millions of people saw these impressions this one woman did of her, and what was effective was that they were dead on. And I thought that was, I thought her tenure was very badly affected by the internet, because people, while they didn't directly attack her, it made an impression that was almost very close and really got to what was wrong with her with people.
Well, that's really what is happening. You know, Lorenzo talked about the power of television in Italy. That doesn't have to change for the internet to be more powerful. What happens is that something may appear first on television, but then millions of people watch it online. That's what happened during the campaign in the States again and again and again. So I don't see it as either or. I see it as a sort of hybrid future, if you want, where television, newspapers, the internet coexist and they feed off each other. I see that as long as people my generation are alive, I don't see the end of newspapers, because we love reading newspapers. We love having a cup of coffee and turning the pages of newspapers and magazines, even as we absorb a lot of the news online. But we don't go to newspapers for news, because by the time we open the morning paper, the news is obsolete. You know, we've already seen the latest and read the latest online.
Right. So why are you reading a newspaper?
I'm reading a newspaper for analysis. I'm reading a newspaper because I still really enjoy kind of the tactile feeling of a newspaper. And just to give you an idea, you know, I was recently on vacation in a place where we couldn't get newspapers, and our host had the software called Newspapers Direct, where you could actually make newspapers from the internet. So that is another demonstration for me that we love both. We love what's happening online and the access it gives us, but we also love the tactile feeling of newspapers. But do you believe that young people read newspapers or will be reading newspapers in 10 years? I have 2 teenage daughters. They do everything online. You know, they watch entire TV shows online, but they buy tons of magazines. So again, they haven't given up the print habit, even though they absorb more and more of their news online. But it's magazines, celebrity I'm guessing celebrity. Yeah, Vogue, you know, Vanity Fair, different magazines.
But they do not watch news on television. They do not watch.
They watch all that online, and I think there's a huge demographic shift. So there's no question that as we've seen in the States, I'm sure we're going to see in Italy, as broadband becomes more widespread here, that more and more young people are going to be consuming news online and consuming news differently. That's the other thing that's really interesting.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Huffington Post, where it's going. How many millions of people come online every month there?
We now have 20 million unique visitors.
A month.
A month. And a very, very active community.
Many times the size of the New York Times, correct?
The New York Times actually has a very vibrant online business.
Right.
That is what is so interesting. We have a more vibrant community. In that last month, we had 1 million commenters. So our community doesn't just absorb news, it talks back to us. And that's part of what we have found really works online. People don't want just to absorb information. They want to engage with the information. You know, will.i.am, you know, the singer, said something really interesting on a panel that we had during the Democratic Convention. He said that when you are absorbing old media, it's as though you are sitting on a couch. When you're absorbing new media, it's as though you are galloping on a horse. You are much more engaged. You are sort of leaning forward in a way. And that is why it can so much more easily lead to activism, the way it did during the campaign.
Right. So the idea of interactivity, right now you have comments. Do you have user-generated video?
Yes, we launched a big citizen journalism project.
Explain this.
Called Off the Bus, where basically we had thousands of people from around America reporting on what was happening. And we broke many stories, including one of our citizen reporters, who happened to be a middle-aged housewife from the Bay Area, was at a fundraiser with Barack Obama when he made these comments about bitter people clinging to God and guns. And that turned out to be called Bittergate and became one of the
absolutely
one of the news stories that derailed the Obama campaign for a while.
Right.
So that was also an important moment for the Huffington Post, because it showed that even though, as you said, Cara, we have clear, transparent opinions, we are not going to hold back from reporting the truth.
Right.
That for me is the sort of the essence of journalism. It's about truth. It's not about always presenting two sides to every story, because sometimes there is only one side to the story. Yet the American media for years had an endless debate over global warming. So you would have a television show and the anchor would introduce, say, Al Gore or the equivalent to talk about the dangers of global warming, and then somebody like Senator James Inhofe, who thinks that global warming is a fraud, and these two positions would be presented as though they were equally valid. Now that's one of the problems with old media, because they are not equally valid. In the same way that, you know, the Earth is not flat, and evolution is real, and global warming is real.
Yeah, at the journal we have, it's called the "to be sure" quote, where we always have to do the other side. I find it ridiculous on some level.
And that's part of what's changing.
Right. Now, you were talking about having a citizen journalist. Do you see that being the way things go, that they're going to be, because one of the jokes we had made on a panel, I think, in Washington was citizen journalism is like citizen surgery. Perhaps not the safest thing that you want to have happen. Is there a role for, people are worried about the idea that there's not investigative, there's not, that news is not broken in the same way, that there is not rigor, although you can argue that the media has done a poor job on Iraq, on this financial crisis, and not uncovering things. What happens to investigative, what happens to, you know, the money that has been spent by professional media organizations with all these online, less expensive, cheaper to put together, smaller media organizations like your own?
Well, I actually am very optimistic about the future of investigative journalism, because what I see is happening, certainly with the Huffington Post, we are next week launching an investigative fund, which is going to be a combination of funds that we are putting in, the Huffington Post is putting in, and non-profit funds from foundations. So I see a growing trend towards non-profit, for-profit partnerships focusing on investigative journalism. But the other reason why I'm optimistic is because what happens online, which is a great bonanza for investigative journalism, is that a story is pursued again and again and again. While old media suffer from attention deficit disorder. You know, they cover a story, they break a story, and then they move on to what Jon Stewart calls the next shiny object. In online media, stay with the story. We suffer, if you want, from obsessive compulsive disorder. You know, we cover a story and we cover a story until something happens and it breaks through.
Give an example of that. John Edwards, the John Edwards situation was broken on your site, correct?
Well, it was kind of broken on our site, but not really. It wasn't until the National Enquirer got the pictures of his baby that it was confirmed, and John Edwards had to confirm it. But if you take a story like Judy Miller.
Judy Miller is the New York Times reporter who had written about weapons of mass destruction, saying they were there when they apparently weren't.
Right.
Kind of a big mistake on her part.